it was this revelation to me how good I felt when I tried ice swimming and got hooked on it, cycling year round in the winter, even when it's like -10, -20. And then I started looking into it, and there's actually research and evidence and a lot of background on what that does to the body physiologically and mentally. I mean, it sets off, endorphins, the happy hormones. It reduces stress.
Hey everyone, I'm Andy Petronic. I'm the co-founder of the Whole Life Challenge, and welcome to episode 1 of the Breaking Ordinary podcast. This is a show about raising the bar, improving your life, transforming your health, fitness, and well-being, and shattering the status quo. My guests are people who have found their inner strength and confidence to lead from the front, to stand out, to be different, and to truly make a difference in the world of health, fitness, and well-being. Their stories will astound, inspire, and inform, and will help generate ideas that spring you into action. Yes, it's an exciting day for the podcast. We've rebranded, we've changed names. I'm actually going to probably keep the numbering intact. Rather than starting completely over, starting with a new, completely different podcast, this is not what I do full-time for a living. So I've got one podcast, and it's just going to change names. Hopefully, I'm not going to keep changing names. This is the third name, the second name change that I've made in less than a year. And that is the first thing I wanted to let you guys know. I'm always experimenting. I'm always exploring. I'm always trying new things. And we changed. I always felt like the podcast should have a different feel than the Whole Life Challenge. It's not the same as the Whole Life Challenge. So when I first started podcasting, I didn't have anything else to really think of calling it except the Whole Life Challenge podcast. And then I thought, well, this is my opportunity when I rebranded it to kind of stand out from within the Whole Life Challenge. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to just call the podcast the Andy Petronic Podcast. But one of the things I realized over the about 6 months that we've had that name is that many people that go to the podcast that see the Andy Petronic Podcast have absolutely no idea what that means. I'm not a household name as much as I might like to think I am. And I want people to have some idea from the title. If the title was by the most famous locksmith of all time, named James, James Value. The James Value podcast would mean nothing to me, but being the world's greatest locksmith would be I would know about what I'm getting myself into. So that was the intention behind changing the name. And it's been quite a process. I spent many, many, many hours and much creative time coming up with words and names. I mean, Breaking Ordinary was not easy to come to. And neither was the artwork. We actually did a 99 designs contest just to give us new, fresh ideas. And of course, I screwed that up. I didn't set it up quite the right way because I've never really done it before. But I had hundreds of entries and decided on the one I decided with, much to the chagrin of a few of the other people on my team. They didn't really like the direction I was headed with this. But as it turns out, they do now. And it's my podcast. So it doesn't matter. I mean, hopefully you guys like the artwork. I love it. It inspires me and makes me want to do more of it. And that's really what's important for me. Hopefully it gets other people into the Whole Life Challenge world and into my world, into this breaking ordinary world. Because really, when I look back at the types of conversations I've had over the last 2 years with guests, yes, they've been in the area of health and well-being, but it's all health and well-being as related to what I would say breaking ordinary. These people are either they're super achievers, they're overachievers, they're writing about things that are fringe, that are, or maybe not fringe, but they're incredibly useful for lots of people, but they're things not many people know about. Take, for instance, my guest today, I'm sure you haven't heard of her before. Her name's Katja Pantzar, and she's the author of a book called The Finnish Way. The Finnish Way happens to be Sisu, and it's not a word that has a translation in English. And I'll tell you a little bit more about her in 1 second, but I just want to finish up with a name change story and then remind you guys of a couple things. So one of the other decisions I had to make was, do we restart the podcast? Do we start a brand new podcast? Decided just to keep it intact, keep it the way it is, change the artwork. So now it looks like every episode was the Breaking Ordinary podcast. And what else? I'm super excited about it. I'd love to hear from you. If you like it, if you like the artwork, snap a picture of it, stick it up on Instagram, tag me. I'm at Andy Petronic. Stick it up on Twitter. Stick it up on Facebook. Send me an email. The email address for the podcast is podcast@wholelifechallenge.com. So I'd love to hear from you. So a couple things about me that I'm working on, and you heard me talk about this last week, is I'm now doing corporate speaking events. So if we're doing a lot of the speaking for companies that are doing the Whole Life Challenge. So if you're in that category, or you did the Whole Life Challenge and you have a company or organization that you think would be prime candidates for doing the Whole Life Challenge, I'd love to hear from you. And, whether it's to get your company to do the Whole Life Challenge, or it's to have me come out and talk about health and wellness in the corporate environment and health and wellness in life, I'd love to do that. So again, email me at podcast@wholelifechallenge.com. Many of you know I have a monthly newsletter. I didn't publish an episode. I didn't publish what is it called? I don't want to call it an episode. I didn't publish an episode on the beginning of October because I really didn't have a whole lot to say. And rather than just sending you something to be a placeholder for October, I just decided I'd wait till November. So that will be coming. And I've got a whole slew of bodyweight workouts on my YouTube channel. Oh, actually on the Whole Life Challenge YouTube channel. You can find them at Whole Life Challenge. You can find them on the Whole Life Challenge YouTube channel, but you can also find them on my website, andypetronic.com/workouts. They're bodyweight workouts. You can do them in your hotel room, in your living room. I'm actually going to record another one this afternoon. And they're 40. This will be 41 that will be published next week. So check it out. I don't want to belabor bringing Katja in any longer. Katja's book, The Finnish Way, is a book that really surprised me. I didn't really expect much, except for the fact that it's about Sisu. And if you remember, some of you remember Scott McGee, who was a guest on my podcast, about a year ago. He's a Santa Monica SWAT team member, and he has a podcast called The Sisu Way. I was just a guest on his podcast, so I know all about Sisu. And Sisu is really a mindset. It's about a willingness to do whatever it takes to get the job done. It's a willingness to take the harder road because you know that the work involved in the harder road is worth it, is valuable. Like one example we talk about in the podcast is raking leaves. You may hire a gardener to rake your leaves, but there are a lot of people, especially in Finland, who have this Sisu mentality. They want to do the raking of the leaves because they know that the investment in their body, their yard, their house, the beautifying of their house is time well spent. And Sisu can be anything from yard work to your body, to your health, to your relationship with your wife or your husband, to your spiritual development and your spiritual connection to God. Taking the road, when you don't feel like meditating and you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and the alarm goes off and that's your time to meditate and you're like, I'm going to roll over and not do it. Sisu would have you do it. A lot of people find Sisu through swimming in cold water or taking cold showers. We talk about that in the podcast. That's one of my accessees. So listen, I'm not going to tell you more about the podcast because it's time for you to listen and time for you to hear it straight from Katja. So here we go. 3, 2, 1, Katja Pantzar. So, some people might have already joined us on YouTube Live. I have no idea. But if you have, welcome to the podcast. I'm Andy Petronic of The Whole Life Challenge. And this is Katja. Do you say Pantzar? Yeah,
actually in English I say Katja Pantzar.
Katja.
It's just too
Thank
complicated
you.
to pronounce.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for correcting me, Katja.
No problem.
And she's the author of a book called The Finnish Way. In England, actually, I was doing some research online and I found this other book called Finding Sisu. And I thought, God, is this another book by Katja? And no, it turns out that that's the version that has been published in England. And so just same book, different title. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you.
I've been, and what's really cool about this is you're in Finland and I'm here in the United States. Like how many time zones away? 9 time zones? 8 time zones?
Yeah, I think it's a 10-hour difference because you're on the West
10?
Coast.
Yeah.
Which is not far from, I grew up in Vancouver, so I know the time zone difference.
You've been living with that for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to tell you something. Since I read your book, I don't really shy away from things that are hard typically, but there's one thing that I despise, and that's being cold.
I knew you were going to say that.
And because I've got low body fat, the story I have about why I despise being cold is that I have low body fat and that, I'm not cut out for the cold. Like it's just not, not my thing, especially cold water. It's not really cold air. I love snowboarding and skiing and winter sports. And so after reading your book, I was like, what am I just I don't know, the word pussy comes to mind. Sorry if that's no good for you.
Word, yeah.
Come on, dude, just buck up. Like Sisu, find your Sisu. And so since that day of finishing your book, I have not taken a hot shower. It's been
good for you.
It's been like 6-7 weeks.
Yeah.
And now it helps. Well, it's helpful that it's really hot right now in California. Like it's been, we've had since the weekend of like July 4th, it's been like 80s and 90s and humid and really hot. So it's been very helpful actually to like convince myself that, okay, I don't really have to convince myself. I want to take a cold shower.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I wouldn't have, even then, I would not have taken a cold shower. Like it would have been hot and maybe finished with cold.
Yeah.
And it's been really, really cool. I don't know physiologically what it's done, if anything, but it's more the mental toughness of being willing to step into it's not ice cold, but it feels ice cold sometimes, and being just willing to just step in, and not cave into my, I don't know, laziness or, it's not lazy. I don't know what it is exactly.
The discomfort, right?
Yeah, discomfort.
The discomfort is like, it's something that you don't gravitate towards. And right. I will say that when I moved to Finland, and actually, I've lived in many places, but I largely grew up in Vancouver, which has a very mild climate. And when I moved to Toronto, which has real winters, I really suffered from the cold. I wore like 2 winter coats for the first winter, just to survive.
Yep.
And I was not a fan of the cold. But when I moved to Finland and, I saw all these examples of people who really embraced the cold, by ice swimming, winter swimming, which is this practice of having icy dips, when the weather is very cold, but also the water is about 2 to 4 degrees Celsius. And like cycling year round.
How cold is that in Fahrenheit? Is that like 38, 40-ish?
Yeah. I should know that, and unfortunately, I don't. I don't have the conversion right in front of me, but yeah, it's about that. Like it's just above 0 in Celsius.
Yep.
So because obviously you can't swim in freezing if it's frozen. You can't. Although
you mean you don't cut a hole in the ice and then go in? You don't do that? You do that.
Actually, yeah. We do cut a hole in the ice, but what I mean is that there has to be water. Like it can't be frozen all the way down. It can't be 0 degrees.
Right.
But what it was this revelation to me how good I felt when I tried ice swimming and got hooked on it. Cycling year round in the winter, even when it's like -10, -20. And then I started looking into it, and there's actually research and evidence and a lot of background on what that does to the body physiologically and mentally. I mean, it sets off, endorphins, the happy hormones. It reduces stress. It does a whole bunch of positive things. And I'm speaking now of the ice swimming, of the immersion in cold water for like 30 seconds or a minute. And, some of those same effects you get with a cold shower. You're forced to be in the moment, so it's a kind of meditation too. You can't worry about what's on your to-do list, but it also completely perks up the body. It gets you going. It can help with if you have muscle aches or pains, or you feel really tired or lethargic, or maybe you're feeling a bit down. It's like a little bit of cold shock therapy.
It's so easy to collapse into, I don't want to, or I like into the idea that it's too cold. I'm not cut out for this. This episode is brought to you today by The Good Kitchen. The Good Kitchen has been a sponsor of the Whole Life Challenge now for about 6 months. They provide incredibly well-prepared, delicious, home-cooked, Whole Life Challenge compliant, paleo, organic, sustainably sourced meals, pre-made meals right to your doorstep. They do it through FedEx. It comes in a sealed containers that you can open up once a day. You can get your meals delivered, your lunches delivered, your breakfasts delivered, your dinners delivered. I use them for lunch. They're incredibly easy. They eliminate any need for decision making for my lunches. I just go downstairs, open up the lid. A lot of the times I just eat it cold right out of the container, and I love it. It's fantastic. So do yourself a favor and give it a try. You get 15% off your first order. You use the link thegoodkitchen.com/WLC. thegoodkitchen.com/WLC. Check it out. You'll be happy you did. I just pulled up a new article on the Whole Life Challenge blog. It's entitled 5 Ways to Know If a Digital Trainer is Right for You. And it's by Megan Maroney. And Megan was a guest of mine on the podcast. Let's see. She was a guest of mine 3 or 4 weeks ago. She is the host of Twit TV. She's been a tech reporter, journalist for like 20 years. She works with Leo Laporte, and who's known as the tech guy. And she's just a wealth of info. She's a mom. She does the Whole Life Challenge. It's really cool stuff. So I can't wait to read it. There she is. All right. Let's see if that's better. I was just kind of talking to myself to because if anybody's watching on YouTube, they need something to look at. So they were watching me just talking.
That's good.
It sounds better now. I don't know what happened, because when we were getting ready for the podcast, that wasn't happening at all. And all of a sudden, it did. So
it probably was just some weird interference or something. Yeah.
So this sounds great. Way, 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 way better. So let's roll again. So we were talking about cold and the willingness that I have. I was one of the things I was saying while you were gone is that it's been really interesting, the whole story that I had concocted around how I shouldn't get in the cold shower. My feet would stay cold. My hands would stay cold, because my feet typically get cold when I sleep. I sleep with socks on, and even in the summertime, because my feet get cold. My feet are cold right now. I'm barefoot and my feet are cold, and it's hot. It's pretty hot out. It's like 75 Fahrenheit, and so whenever I would go to get in the shower, I would concoct this story around, like, don't use cold water because it'll just make you colder, and you'll never recover, or you'll have to spend 20 minutes in front of a heater to warm back up. And that just hasn't been true.
Yeah, I think this is something too that it actually helps build up your cold resistance when you have cold showers, or you practice ice swimming, or you build up your resistance. Let's say that you're biking in really cold weather. Of course, the first couple of minutes it feels very cold, but you're exercising and you're getting the blood is flowing and the endorphins and all these things. And then the same thing a lot of people say about ice swimming or winter swimming, or even cold water swimming, as it's called in many parts of the world, is it helps build up their resistance to the cold, so they don't feel and suffer from the cold as much. Yeah. Along with a whole bunch of other health benefits. Yeah.
I think it probably helps, although maybe not, that you actually live in a climate where you don't have a choice. If you want to ride a bike in the wintertime in Finland, what are you going to do? You can ride an indoor bike, I guess.
You could ride an indoor bike, but I guess one of the big things that I discovered when I moved to Finland was this constant connection to nature that people have. And how much that really helped lower my stress levels. And if I was feeling like anxious or tired, and something as simple as, okay, if I'm cycling to work, I'm going to cycle through a park, a wooded area, or along the waterfront instead of on a busy street. Mm-hmm. And once I got hooked on cycling, I turned it into something year round. And it actually was quite easy. You get studded tires for your bike so that you can handle the snow and the slush and the sleet and the ice. And as long as you're well dressed for whatever the temperature is, it's actually really quite easy to do. It's not difficult, and like any kind of exercise, after the first couple of minutes, your heart starts pumping and you wake up and you warm up, and you're not suffering from the cold. You're actually kind of enjoying it.
Yeah. I remember I was a Marine, and we did some winter training up in Bridgeport, California, which is near Lake Tahoe in the Sierras. Yeah. And I remember one of the last things we did was we had learned how to cross-country ski. It was my first experience cross-country skiing. And we had a 5K at the end, like the whole battalion. There were 250 of us, and the whole group had this 5K race. And I remember showing up to the start line with my fatigues on. So we wear white fatigues when you're in the snow. And we had white fatigues on. And I was wearing my undershirt, my green T-shirt. And that's all I was wearing. And it was freezing. It was like 35 degrees, windy. The Marines around me looked like they looked at me like I was a complete fruitcake. And I'm like, no, I know I'm going to get hot. Like I'm going to suffer right now, but I know, within 2 minutes, I am going to be thankful that I do not have what you got on. And sure enough, I mean, they all overheated. They had to, disrobe and then take their jacket and tie it around their waist. And, it was just, but I think the key thing is really being willing to start. Because that's the hardest part. Like, right? That's when you walk out of your house and it's cold out. And cold is relative. In California, I'm cold sometimes when it's 55 degrees or 60 degrees, and you get I'm attuned to those temperatures. Yeah. But it's a weird thing, but like being willing to just begin, like these cold showers. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think it's also, it's that starting, and that's kind of this Sisu, tapping into this fortitude, this like, okay, I'm not going to use it as an excuse, that, the fact that it's really cold out. But also for me, it was the discovery of something that seems crazy, going swimming in like freezing cold water. Yep. Actually makes you feel amazing and makes you feel really good and gets rid of, tiredness, body aches, a whole bunch of things. You solve all these problems really quite quickly, because 30 seconds to a minute it's not a huge time investment. And so you start to look forward to the start of the season, the winter swimming season,
Right.
you know, and because you know it's going to feel good, and you know that it's maybe there's a little bit of no pain, no gain kind of attitude, but it's also okay. So the first 30 seconds are going to feel a little bit uncomfortable, and you know, of course, as I walk out onto the dock wearing my bathing suit and my hat, and you know, it's -5 or -10, you know, that's already pretty chilly. But I guess it's that thing of you're tapping into your own kind of badassness, like I can do this, I'm tough.
Yeah.
But also when you get hooked on it, it just feels so good that it's a really minor inconvenience, you know, to be cold for that minute or two as you walk to the water. And then the amazing thing is, of course, once you've done your cold water immersion and you come out, you feel warm because everything, your whole body is alive and it's tingling, and you're not standing on the dock freezing going, oh, you know, I need to get inside. And so experiences like that really changed my relationship to cold weather and to this idea of like, oh, I love coffee, but actually I'm going to feel much better if, you know, on a cold winter day, I get out there and I go for a walk or a run or a swim, or I cycle to work or whatever. And it's, of course, if you live in a cold climate, you know, it's something that you're better off embracing, because if you try to avoid the cold, you know, that's a pretty long process, you know, 6 months of cold winter. Yeah.
Does everybody do this in Finland? I mean, is this just a culture where people are tough and they have to deal with the cold, and they ice swim and they cycle in the wintertime and they have studs on their bike tires and they just all do this?
No, not everybody does it. I mean, winter swimming is very popular, but there are, of course, people. We have a place in our neighborhood, and there's people who, you know, when they're out walking their dogs, sort of shake their heads at us like, what are you guys doing? You know, it's snowing and you guys are standing in your bathing suits and voluntarily going for a dip in the Baltic. So no, it's not like everybody is doing it, but it is very, very popular. And I think right now there's a bit of a resurgence going on, or it's growing in popularity, in that a lot of the clubs have waiting lists, you know, to join. And there's a lot of places where you can try it out to see if you like it. And I've been surprised, public pools and things like that, that sometimes there's a lineup for people waiting for the cold pool because they want to try it out, because they've heard about, you know, the benefits of cold water therapy.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, Wim Hof has made a lot of inroads in you know, bringing the idea of cold and Sisu and toughness and breathing techniques to the world. And now is he? I can't remember. Is he Finnish?
No, I believe I could be. I have a feeling he's Dutch, but I'm not 100% sure.
I think I get that whole part of the world very, you know, like very confused. I have a really good friend who's Danish, and you know, don't call me Dutch. Yeah. And I've learned the hard way, like, that's different. It's
yeah. I'm pretty sure Wim Hof, just his name sounds, I have a recollection. Dutch is what I would, if I was on a game show and I had to guess, that's what I would say, but I could be wrong. Yeah. But yeah, he's known as the Iceman, and he's taken the whole cold, the benefits of cold and everything to a completely different level. I mean, compared to him, I'm just a regular person who does what a lot of people in this city do. Yeah.
A lot of people do what? Do what he does?
No, a lot of people do what I do, which is, you know, practice the winter swimming and cycle year round. And, you know, if it's -10 and there's a gorgeous sunny, snowy day, you'll just see the shoreline full of people going out for walks, and people embrace the cold, you know, the skiing, all kinds of activities. So it's not something that they shy away from, but it's like part of the lifestyle and part of being connected to nature as well, because there's so many opportunities for that in Helsinki, the capital where I live. You know, the shoreline is dotted with islands. We're surrounded by water, and there's a lot of forests and places, so you can very easily access nature year round. And for example, in a lot of the forests, they light the trails at night. And in the wintertime, of course, it's very dark here because we're so far north. We have endless sunlight in the summer, and then not endless darkness, but we have very little light when we approach Christmas.
Like what when you say very little, what time does the sun rise and what time does it set?
Well, in the
winter
heart
time.
of darkness,
Yeah.
In the heart of darkness, in the wintertime, there's probably about 5 hours of daylight.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the opposite in the summertime. If you go really far north up to Lapland, the sun doesn't set at all at midsummer. So it's 24 hours of sunlight.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's similar to Alaska here. They have that thing. Hey, Katja, the sound is really driving me berserk.
Oh, that's terrible that it happened to happen now. Yeah.
Well, we'll move on. No big deal.
We'll move on.
Yep.
It's an example of Sisu is when stuff doesn't go the way that you plan it to, then you just figure out a way to Sisu it up and tap into a little bit of fortitude and just figure out a different way.
I love that. So we are actually practicing Sisu right now in the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a famous line from a movie that Clint Eastwood was in. He played a character called Gunny Highway. He was a Marine, and he used to say, "Improvise, adapt, and overcome." And that was a famous line from, I think it was called Heartbreak Ridge was the movie. So it sounds very Sisu.
I like that too, and that's kind of what you've got to do. I think in all areas of your life, but especially when it comes to well-being. If you want to have sort of simple and sensible ways of staying healthy, that I think that's a really good motto. Instead, you just adapt and you keep going and you figure out ways to do things.
Yeah, because if you let yourself get stopped regularly by the obstacles in the way, and maybe this is one of the mental toughness things that gets trained by being willing to do these things. If you're in the habit of letting yourself get stopped, you never make progress in the areas that are actually hard in your life. I mean, does that make sense?
It does totally make sense, and I think that's what I kind of learned about Sisu. In that, the historical examples are, of like great feats during the war, during the Winter War, the way that the Finns held off the then Soviets, rather than being invaded, and, these great feats of sportsmanship. Or I should say sportspersonship, but it's a male example. There was this runner, Lasse Viren, who at the 1972 Munich Olympics, it was the 10,000 meter run, and he fell down during the run. And not only did he get up and continue running, he won the race and set a new world record. Wow. And this is like these are the historical Finnish Sisu examples of, real extreme stuff. But I think I kind of see it as a daily Sisu, which is that, you wake up in the morning and maybe you're feeling tired, you haven't slept properly, you're stressed, whatever. And it's like you Sisu it up and it's like, okay, I'm going to go for my little jog or my walk or my swim, or, I'm going to do the things that are going to help me feel better and make me stronger. I'm going to have that difficult conversation with my spouse or tackle that project I've been putting off. It's exactly that. It's like embracing the difficult stuff. And oftentimes I've noticed when I do that, it actually leads to a much better outcome. And it doesn't mean I'm going to run a marathon, but I can slowly and gradually push myself to do things that are a little bit outside my comfort zone and a little bit outside of my lazy zone. The lazy one who wants to pull the covers, over her head or put off a certain project or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm hearing in this conversation is that the level of difficulty, it's not about being extreme. It's about finding that edge for you. And for one person, it might be having a hard conversation with your spouse. For another person, it might be taking a warm shower as opposed to a hot shower. It doesn't have to be extreme. Jump in the freaking Arctic the first time you try this. You're not failing if you don't take it to the extreme and take ice baths every night. You can find the line for you and move in the direction of just tackling the things that are hard.
And I think that's exactly what it is. And then the backdrop to this is, of course, I grew up in North America and came of age at a time where, of course, I spent time in nature and I exercised and I did things, but a lot of things were in a culture of convenience. You drive by car to the gym. You do a lot of things that in the most convenient way possible. And it seemed to me when I moved to Finland, that when I looked back at my life in North America, a lot of things that had to do with well-being, with diet, with exercise were very complicated. They were often expensive. They were hard to follow because there was always a new diet and it was very restrictive and you couldn't eat this and you couldn't eat that. And part of how I interpret Sisu is it's this, simple and sensible approach to well-being. It's like, okay, I have a really busy day. How about if I ride my bike to work and I'm going to get some incidental exercise? And if I don't have time to do anything else, I've kind of connected a little bit with nature. I've cycled. I've gotten my, heart rate up a little bit. And it doesn't have to be, a 3-hour bike ride. It can be just a 20-minute bike ride. And a lot of these same principles, people here, for example, are really very into foraging for berries and mushrooms in the forest, and this kind of DIY Sisu where you do things on your own instead of, the convenient way, like going to the grocery store and buying them.
Hey guys, a quick reminder that this podcast lives and breathes based on your willingness to recommend it to other people. If you heard something in this episode that you think a friend of yours would really like to hear about, please send them a link to the show. Snap a picture of you listening to it on your iPhone, put it up on Instagram, or share about it in Twitter or on Facebook. If you're feeling really great and want to leave a review, you can go to bit.ly/Breaking Ordinary, and you can write a review of the show. I would love it. And that's another way that people find out about what we're up to. The other thing that does is it helps me to get more impactful guests, people in the world who are really making a difference. Not that my guests aren't today, but I want to keep doing this. And the only way I can justify doing it is if the audience grows. So please help me help you. Leave a review, send an email to a friend, let them know about the podcast. And now let's get back to the show.
Or making your life more complicated, like in my opinion, driving your car to a gym to sit on a stationary bicycle and watch television, is it's time consuming, it's costly. You're also not outdoors, so your connection to nature, to the air, the earth, the whatever is lacking. So the way that I interpret Sisu is it's this beyond these big, huge historical examples, it's really about, what works in your life. Would it be easy? Maybe you're not interested in a marathon or a triathlon or anything, but maybe, a couple times a week you go for a walk in a park, or you do something that gives you a little bit of exercise, a little bit of downtime. You turn off all your devices, and this not taking the easy way out. I mean, so many people that I know here, they own cars, but they don't drive to work. They bike to work.
Right.
It's a choice. And so this is really, it's about pushing yourself, but pushing yourself in a way that works for you, because we all have different things that work for us. I personally, I don't have any aspirations to be like a super athlete, but I would like to be strong and healthy and in shape. And I realized I could do that without having to go on an extreme program or, hire a personal trainer or do those sorts of things.
Yeah. As you're talking, I remembered a time I bought an electric bike about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was riding it, and I just made a commitment to not driving my car to, and at the time I was running a gym, CrossFit Los Angeles, and I would just made a commitment. So even if I was opening the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd have to get on my bike at 5:15, and it would take me 20 minutes. And it was easy because I had the commitment to all or nothing. Like I didn't even give myself the option of getting in my car. And as soon as I entered into the world of, wow, well, I guess you could take your car. About 2 years later, I stopped riding my bike completely.
Yeah.
Not on purpose, just because I started giving myself that option. It's weird.
And it's something that I think it's very interesting because I sometimes, I work as a freelance journalist and a writer. I do a bunch of different things. And sometimes I have early morning news shifts that start at 7 a.m., which means that I have to get up quite early.
Yep. And
I just so quickly realized that I felt so much better if I made that effort to, have it all together so that I could bike to work rather than, taking public transit or driving or something. I don't actually own a car, but, in terms of other forms of transport, that it was such a good investment. It was so worth it. And I felt so much better. I was awake by the time I got to the newsroom.
Yep.
And I've heard this from so many people, some of whom I interviewed in the book as well, is you get hooked on it. And the days you don't cycle, you feel like a little less energetic. You feel like something's missing. Your body hasn't quite woken up. And so I think that was the other goal with this book was, there's all these simple and sensible ways. And when you turn it into a habit, sometimes it can be a really lovely habit, like your example of, cycling to the gym. You probably felt really good when you got to the gym.
Yeah, felt great.
A, not just because of the exercise, but B, because you had overcome yourself.
Right.
I'll just hop in my car, or, I can't be bothered today, or I feel tired or whatever. It's like this feeling of personal accomplishment.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's also something very interesting that occurred for me, and it still does. Like I just thought of something else that I've been doing over the past month is I've been getting up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and setting my alarm to get up at 5 a.m. because I want to have at least an hour of complete quiet time in the house when nobody else is up and there are no distractions that, like life gets spun up, and I like that time. But if I don't, I just made a commitment. Okay, I'm getting up. And it's been fairly easy to do that. Like, because I do it every day, I don't give myself an option. I set a watch alarm on my Garmin so that I don't wake up my wife. And it's surprisingly easy, but I think it's easy because I'm consistent and I'm not giving myself an option.
I agree with the sort of consistency, not giving yourself an option. And there's actually been lots of fabulous books about this. Like I think Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit.
Yes.
If your habit is that you eat a bag of potato chips and watch TV every night, it's hard to break that because it's become a habit. And the same thing, like you're setting your alarm for 5 a.m., once you get into the habit of it and you reap the rewards, you probably look forward to it. And it's like this wonderful hour of getting yourself ready for the day or doing whatever it is that you do. But having that break from everything else that probably makes you stronger for the rest of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like really connecting your feet to the ground for me and giving myself a jumping off point. But the other thing that came up for me when I was thinking about riding my bike to the gym is there was a weird, and I don't know if this is weird or not, maybe it's normal, but I felt like I had an edge over everyone else.
Yeah.
Like I felt like, I look at me. I did something that nobody else is doing. That's a big thing for me. Like I taught myself to unicycle this year, and nobody that I know that's over 50 years old learns to unicycle. It's hard as hell. It took me like 4 months. And, but there's something that I love about feeling like I'm doing something that nobody else will do and will even consider doing. Like I just, so I feel like I have a little bit of an edge.
I think edge is a really good word. I think the other part of it is that overcoming yourself, overcoming whatever, like, oh, people over a certain age don't do this, or no one else is doing this. I did it. I think that's one part of it, like with the unicycle. But I think the other thing that I noticed early on when I moved here was I could really quickly tell who had walked or biked to the newsroom or the editorial, because I work in several different places, but they have a completely different energy and almost an optimism, because they've sort of gotten their machinery, as it were, the human body going.
Yep.
And they've reaped all the benefits of, some fresh air and getting all those, the happy hormones going, and, their brain is on. I mean, there's a lot of evidence, of course, about how movement, and it doesn't have to be hardcore, but how movement, starts everything firing, in the brain, and your thoughts and your some of the best ideas come when you're cycling or walking or running or doing something physical. And I could imagine the unicycle has also a meditative quality, because you have to worry about your balance.
Yes,
like
you do.
Have to, yeah.
Yes, you do.
Have to be in a certain kind of zone, and you have to believe in yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Did what were some of the things that affected you? Maybe who are some of the people that affected you in your journey to figuring this out yourself? Because you talk a lot about that in the book, and your own journey into this Sisu mindset. Were there people, particular people that had an influence over that path?
Yes, there were. Some of them were, people that I interviewed in the book. I just noticed that there were a lot of women that I met, and men too, but women in my neighborhood who belonged to this winter swimming club that I just had the opportunity as a journalist. I was like, oh, I just have to try this thing. This is crazy, like go and jump in ice cold water. But through them, I sort of observed their lifestyles, and these are women who are juggling, family, work, a whole bunch of things. And they just had this very organic approach to life, they're very active, in addition to the cycling and the swimming, skiing and doing yoga, and always out in the woods and doing all these sorts of things. And that really made an impression on me, because they seem to be a little bit more grounded and a lot less concerned with a lot of the issues that I really noticed growing up in North America, this endless quest for the perfect body, the perfect weight, the perfect diet, do you have the right car, the status symbol, all of these kinds of things. So these women were really inspiring to me. And if there were some men as well, but I point to the women because it was two women who took me to the winter swimming club, and then a whole kind of world opened up through them. But I also just in general observed the really, Finns spend a lot of time in nature. It's like the statistic is staggering. It's like something like 96% spend 1 or 2 times a week in the woods, or near the water, or something like that. And this connection to nature, and even when you live in a big city, away from sort of this consumerism and this virtual lifestyle, and so those were very inspiring. But I also noticed that a lot of people had this that they're not going to quit. It's like, if you say you're going to do something, you do it.
Right.
Yeah. And so that inspired me. And then, of course, when I started working on the book, I interviewed a woman who is a PhD. She's studying Sisu, Emilia Lahti. She's quite well known, actually, internationally. And so, I started interviewing people to find out more about Sisu. And these people really, really inspired me as well, because their stories often were about overcoming great adversity. Emilia Lahti is a survivor of domestic abuse, and she's turned that into a campaign called Sisu, Not Silence, which is all about doing things to raise awareness about these issues. And she just ran 50 marathons in 50 days across New Zealand.
Wow.
As part of this campaign. Yeah. And so there were a lot of people who I noticed embodied this idea of Sisu, and whether they were just regular folks that I came across, or experts that I interviewed on, everything from the Nordic diet, from like sensible eating, to incidental exercise, which is, raking leaves, cleaning house, doing all these kinds of things. That's exercise.
Right.
You don't have to make it complicated.
Right.
Yeah. So this kind of sisuing it up and just doing things that are not that difficult, but they require a little bit of oomph, because at least from my North American perspective, the first instinct is to hire somebody to clean your house.
Yeah.
You outsource a lot of things that are actually good for us, because we need movement. We need, our bodies were not designed to go from one air-conditioned space to another air-conditioned space, and be online all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yet we're almost wired to think that we should do that. Like it's a weird thing, because you can easily convince yourself that, how do I really want to be spending an hour? Do I want to clean my house? I could just hire somebody. My time is worth, if I'm a lawyer, my time is worth $450 an hour, $600 an hour. Why should I spend that hour cleaning the house? I can hire somebody that will charge me $100 an hour or $80 an hour. And I'm actually making money on that time. And so it's almost like I don't know. It's almost like we're programmed to think that work is not meaningful, or that I'd rather be playing a video game right now, than outside raking leaves.
For sure. And I think these are personal choices, that like your example, working as a lawyer, you do the math, and it makes sense to have someone clean your house, and maybe you don't like house cleaning, and, and I guess this kind of DIY Sisu really fascinated me, because I met so many people who could easily afford to have somebody clean their house.
Yep.
But they were like, no, this is a certain form of Sisu too. It's like, I'm going to do something that is not my favorite thing, but I'm going to I'm going to do it. And then, I'm going to get a little workout, and then I'm going to feel like I've accomplished something. Yeah. And that intrigued me. And then there was a fellow who I interviewed, who's a professor emeritus, who has studied incidental exercise all his life. And the benefits of everything from, just simple walking, and he said something very interesting, which was Finland is a country of cottages. Just about everybody has a summer cottage. There's 5.5 million people in Finland, and the estimates are that there's several million cottages. Not everybody owns one, but they'll go and rent them, or they'll stay with a friend or whatever. And he said something really fascinating, which was, just look how few services there are for cottage upkeep. Like, it's something people enjoy doing on their own. They want to renovate, they want to fix, they want to clean. There really isn't a huge industry yet of services to take care of all that. And part of that is, you're in nature, and you have your little cottage, and you take care of it. And it's, again, not taking the easy way out when you could outsource it all.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting thing. I wanted to ask you, how important is community with Sisu? Like it feels to me like very important, but I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, and this is interesting too, because of course the downside of Sisu is if you push yourself too hard, that's not a good thing. I mean, it can lead to burnout and, trying to do everything by yourself, and that's not a good thing. The way that I see Sisu is that I see a real sense of community around it, because it's about often, I mean, in the school system, the Finnish school system is lauded around the world, and part of it is there's this idea of Sisu that you don't give up. If you start something, you finish it, and you work together, you help each other. So if there's a problem, whether it's in school or at work or wherever, I find there's a strong sense of community. And I think one of the best ways to illustrate it was when I first moved here. I found it really, really interesting. I worked for a large magazine publisher at the time for several years. And very early on, I noticed that if there was a big project that was successful, it was always like, oh, this was a team effort and everybody thanked everybody. There was never like this was this one person's idea and they did it and they're going to get an award. And there was often this emphasis on community. And, it's the same thing with, for example, sauna. And there are places where there are saunas, public saunas in Helsinki that are just maintained by the public. Like there's nobody who owns it or runs it. It's based on trust and this idea that, that people bring wood and water and, keep the place clean and follow the rules. And
is it a wood-fired sauna?
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah,
it's amazing. But it's also, there's a lot of shared economy things like toy boxes in playgrounds where the toys are for all the kids to share.
Yeah.
You don't all need to own your own every single piece of equipment or truck or whatever, and even if, for example, you take this sauna, that's a very community activity. People sit in the sauna, some in silence, but a lot of people talk, especially if it's a group of people, like if it's a club and they know each other. It's like the old campfire. People talk about their day and what's going on and current affairs and books they've read, and maybe they're having a problem at home that they want to talk about. So I found a very big sense of community, contrary to the cliche of the solitary Finn who is very quiet and doesn't talk to other people, and a general sense of, just the simple things like you don't litter, like you worry about how things are going to affect other people. So it's sort of more about the we than the me. And that I found a contrast as well to experiences I had in other parts of the world.
Well, it's really interesting, when you were describing those public shared places, I started thinking about when I was in college, how my freshman year, we had, in my fraternity house, we had a TV down in the living room, and a TV and a Betamax VCR, which dates me for sure. And there would be any given day you'd walk into the house in the afternoon or in the early evening, and there'd be a movie on, and there'd be 5, 6, 7, 10, depending on the movie, brothers watching something, brothers or girlfriends or whatever. And as we got further along in technology and the Mac came out, and people started getting their own televisions, by my senior year, we had the same, probably a nicer version of the television in the living room, but you'd walk in the house and the house would feel like a ghost town because everybody had their own television in their own room watching their own shows, whatever they wanted to watch, or movies or whatever, or, doing something else. And and I'm watching it now with my son who's 11, and with iPhones and iPads, we're losing a lot of that community culture that is so valuable because of this this ability to program anything you want, anytime you want, on your own little individual device. I mean, you get 5 kids in a car and they're all watching their own thing on their iPhones.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I have to say that I'm sometimes guilty of, right now my son is on his iPad so that I can do this interview.
Right.
But I completely agree with you that it's also that solitary, that sort of isolation of everybody doing their own thing rather than doing things together as a community. And I think that happens here as well. And I think around the world is happening because people have their own devices, just the way that technology has changed.
Yeah.
But I guess I just saw so many positive examples of, for example, the playground and the shared toys. Of course, we live in the center of the city in an apartment building. So the parks are a good place to take the kids. But I notice when I visit certain parts of North America, there's like no kids out in the parks or even in the yards, and people have really nice yards with, trampolines and all kinds of things for kids. And it often surprises me because I think, well, where are all the people? Because I know that they're nice houses and I know that there's people who live there. And that kind of community, I noticed so much more here, partly because of the way people live. Let's say you live in an apartment, so you're going to take your child to the park, which is a couple blocks away, and then you'll see other families with their kids, and it's community, but also a real focus on, I guess, accessibility for whether they're public swimming pools or art galleries or events where people do things together, and the idea is that there should be access for everyone, that it's not limited to how much money you have or who you know or status. And one good example here is education is virtually free. And the idea is that everybody has a chance. And, if my son is talented, he can go to the top music school because he's talented, not because, his parents have connections or money or, other things. And so my concept of community is also broader than just, the idea of people, for example, in a playground or in a public pool or that kind of an activity. It also goes beyond, kind of an all-inclusiveness and a kind of equality to give everybody a chance at the same kinds of things, whether it's education or healthcare, or the simple thing of nature and exercise. We have this thing here that is called every man's or every person's right, that exists in a lot of other countries as well. But essentially, it means that nobody owns nature. So you are allowed to go just about anywhere beyond public parks, as long as you don't harm other people's property. Like, let's say somebody has a big area, like a cottage or something. You're allowed to walk along the shoreline if you respect their land and their property. You don't do any damage or anything like that. But this idea of access and equality and everything belonging to everybody on some level, which I'm exaggerating because, of course, people do have a lot of private property and there are places you can't go. Yeah. But when I think of, for example, the shoreline of Helsinki, I can swim just about anywhere. And I think in many cities, either the shoreline has been built up or somebody owns the waterfront access because it's expensive and it's not accessible to everybody. So those kinds of forms of community, I find really remarkable and really, really different from many places.
Yeah, it's this interesting mix, I think, of socialism and capitalism. I think a capitalist world taken to the extreme misses out on these shared things, and yet if you take socialism out to the extreme, and I'm not an expert in either one of these areas, but it just occurs to me that way as we're talking, there are huge benefits to having these shared experiences and sharing things and making the land and the use and your son's ability to go to any school that he wants, regardless of the income of the parents. It's a beautiful thing. But I also am a big believer in the work ethic. And if you find out that as you make more money, more of your money disappears to the public property fund, that doesn't really encourage individual, let's do this, let's get it done. So it's an interesting combination, I think.
Yeah, and I think that it's changing. I mean, I think the Nordic countries, yes, there is a level of socialism, but I think they're also changing in many levels. Yes, there are higher taxes to support a lot of these things, like education and healthcare and, things that are accessible to everyone. But I think at the same time, some of these things are also under threat because there is also capitalism in the Nordic countries, and the idea that people can make it through hard work, and come up with their own initiatives. And I think the system is changing enough. Well, again, I'm not an expert enough to comment on this with an expert opinion, but there are a lot of new checks in place to try to encourage people or to even force them, that you can't just get a free ride.
Yeah.
So it's not like you move to the Nordics and you don't need to worry about anything, and you can collect ununemployment.
Yeah, right. Because you want contributing members of society. It's like like why in the U.S. welfare doesn't really work. It just sets people up to be victims of life. And they get a free check and they get their food stamps and and I get that some people need that to get them back on their feet, but they need to get back on their feet.
Definitely. And I guess the thing, I think in the Nordic countries, and one of the reasons they rank so highly on a lot of these, these wellness quality of life rankings is because there is still a kind of safety net there. Like, you will be taken care of. If you become really ill, it's not going to bankrupt you, or kill you because you don't have $100,000 for the specific procedure that's needed, or the care, or the aftercare. And the same thing with education. The idea that it's like a right, a universal right. So I think that the Nordic countries are changing, but I think there is a fairly good balance of having access, to a lot.
Right. That's
people.
Good.
Yeah. And without getting into a political conversation about the whole medical in the U.S. and other things, I think there actually are a lot of liberties here. And if you do want to be an entrepreneur and, make a lot of money, there's a ton of opportunities for that too. I mean, there's a really dynamic startup community here, and all kinds of innovations and things happening. So it's not black and white.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's change gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you, it sounds like you've got all this figured out. Now, I know in many ways you do, but I'm curious, what are some of the ways you don't? What are some of the things you're still struggling with today that have you challenged to either find your Sisu or that you're working on? Yeah.
That's a really good question. It's funny because I don't think that I have it all figured out. I think in my book, I looked at these I don't like to use the word benchmarking, but I just saw all these amazing examples and these ideas that I thought were really worth sharing because they were so simple and sensible. And so, let's just go back to the basics and, let's look at ways that, anybody can do these things. They don't require a special program or a special membership or anything like that. But I struggle. There's days where I feel a bit down or I feel overwhelmed by stress or work or, am I being a good enough mother? Am I like doing, all the things that I should be doing? And like future projects and things like that. Oh, I should have already given my agent, the next proposal and those sorts of things. But I guess that's where the sort of the Sisu steps in, which is like, okay, stop, go for a walk, go for a dip, take a break, just sit down with your son and read with him or just chat with him for a little while or just go outside and play. Like we've had a really hot summer, like we had a major heat wave.
Yeah.
And the first day that it rained, my son was like so excited. He was like, after school, he's like, Mommy, I want to go outside and play in the water, and I just thought that was great. Like,
right.
It was this great example of embrace the elements and, but I definitely have a lot of work to do on myself and on, building up my confidence and my, like my work. And I often maybe hold myself, I'm maybe a little bit overly critical and I need to learn to just be a little bit easier on myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I definitely, I struggle. And I think that's part of the human condition is that we all do in different ways. And if there's something you can do, that's why I wrote this book, is if there's something you can do to help other people, then I think that's really important. For example, I get on Instagram every day, I get like little fan Instagram mails. People have taken a picture of the book and there's a few lines about something that inspired them in the book. And so that's something where I think, okay, this is good. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to help people. But I'm still a work in progress.
I just, as you were talking, I was just looking for you on Instagram so I can connect with you because I haven't done that.
Yeah.
Is it Katja? Is it just your name, Katja Pantzar?
It's my name. It's just my name, and then I just actually, on the advice of my American publisher, Penguin Random House, joined a few months ago, and should have already done it ages ago, yep. And just they said, oh, just post images of things that deal and relate to the book, so whether it's right. like the Nordic diet or swimming or cycling or whatever. And I totally fell in love with Instagram because it's such a great way to tell stories.
It is.
You tell
it is.
And then an image. And and I just suddenly have I get new followers every day, and you just got
a new one. I'm your newest
great.
follower.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. But it's also this wonderful tool. You get these supportive messages from people who have read your book, and you just think, oh, that's so touching. Like somebody who, took the time to reach out and write a little message and take a picture of the book or tell me something in the book that they felt was really useful.
Yep.
And that I like because I find Instagram quite positive compared to where Twitter can be, quite nasty.
Yes.
And then Facebook, I sort of feel like is I don't know what's going on there, but I'm definitely an Instagram fan now. That's my thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool.
It makes me happy.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I feel the same way about Instagram. I really like and enjoy the interaction there and the telling a story through photos, and it's not so serious. Facebook can get very serious. So can Twitter, and Instagram is not as serious.
Yeah. And what I like about what I think I already said, but the positiveness of it.
Yeah.
compared to a lot of the other social media. And it's such a great way to share your world. You know, people are curious, well, what does Finland look like? What does Helsinki look like? What's going on in your part of the world? What's a good piece of advice? You know, like, oh, eat berries. It's a superfood.
Yeah.
You know, they're full of vitamins, or whatever it may be. So I feel like the possibilities there are endless, really. And it's a very nice format for sort of continuing the story.
I want to ask you a logistical question, because I know we're running near the end.
Yeah.
It's funny because I try to keep times on these things, but because we had the technical problems, I'm realizing I have no idea how long we've been going.
Yeah,
I mean,
me neither.
My audio has been going for an hour and 16 minutes, but I don't know how long those breaks are that I'm going to edit out. So So I'm just kind of winging it here. But what this is more of a logistical question. How do you keep all this stuff together in your life? Do you have a system that you use, like an organizational system, like an app, or do you use a big yellow pad and a to-do list, or how do you keep it all together?
That's a very good question too. I actually have a old-fashioned moleskin diary, like
cool.
A day plan.
Yep.
Yeah. So I write, my deadlines in there and other things. I have a pretty good memory. So I usually know, because I do a lot of regular columns and things like that. So I have a fairly good memory. Like I know, okay, that deadline is coming up and I need to be thinking about that.
Yep.
And yeah, I think the old fashioned, I really like the act of writing with a pen in a diary, because I spend so much time online, whether I'm in a newsroom or, editing a magazine or writing on my laptop. So I've actually not embraced apps or electronic or digital calendars as much as I probably should have. And that's one of it's something that calms me and I enjoy. So it's like a little bit of Zen in a wired virtual world.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've gone back and forth between a written version and a digital version, and I find for me that the written version, I don't always have my book with me, and I want to capture my memory is not like yours. My memory is like a freaking sieve. It's terrible. And so I also subscribe to David Allen. David Allen's philosophy is the memory is not designed. Your brain is not designed to capture things. Well, I don't know if that just works for me because it fits with my inability to really remember things, or if that's actually true. But so I try to get everything down. But the problem is, if I have a moleskin or a physical journal, I don't carry a pocketbook. I don't carry a man purse, or and even when I tried doing it with a little small notebook, I just. It's another thing to carry, so I've gone back to I have an app on my iPhone that I use to grab everything, and it's called Things, that I really like. But I like to ask people, like, what are their systems? Because I don't think there's one right system. There are a lot, and I think we all struggle with keeping our lives together.
I totally agree with you. And I do write, like in my iPhone, I do to-do lists and stuff. But what I like about the moleskin as well is that then I always have paper and a pen, and it's the old school writer/journalist in me who likes to write down something interesting someone says or an idea that I get. And somehow it just resonates when I have that brain hand pen connection over something that I have typed.
Yep.
So.
I agree with you. I prefer that. So I really wanted to make the pen and the paper work. So I tried many versions: hardcover, soft cover, small, big, different pens that would motivate me. Like just because I love the pen. And it just became like it was like, okay, I'm trying to stick a square peg into a round hole. I don't always have it with me, and I need it with me. So I use my physical journal for writing in the morning typically, and I use an electronic version just to keep myself regularly organized otherwise.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people use both, but probably more people use electronic or digital or whatever apps, Google Calendars and stuff like that. But I think, there is something I noticed that my writing is very different when I write. Now I'm not talking about scheduling something. I'm talking about just writing. It takes on a very different form if I do it in a notebook compared to when I type it out on my Mac.
Yep.
And that is an interesting thing to me too, because of course you can't do the same sort of editing back and forth, though almost all of my work, for magazines and other places, I start typing immediately, into. So it's more the creative and the idea generation that happens with pen and paper. Yeah.
What, so I got to ask you, I know you mentioned that you should have already had your newest idea to your publisher. What is your newest idea? What's next? What are you planning on? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to reveal it, but we're going to continue on the Sisu theme, and the idea is a kind of daily Sisu, so a guide for helping people tap into daily Sisu. And then there are a few other ideas, and I have the notes and stuff, but I just need to whip it up into a proposal and get it to my agent, who already knows about the idea and is totally on board. And because I've had such a positive response to this book, I mean, it's been sold now in 21 different territories, and that is, a territory is more than just a country, right? Yeah. So I think that people are really interested in this. I think also people are interested in Finland, because not that much has been written about Finland, and we've had all the hygge and the lag, the other Nordic trends, the other Scandi trends. So I think I would like to continue on that theme, because there's just so much material there to be mined, and I think we all struggle, and anything that helps people in kind of simple and sensible ways is really welcome.
Well, I love also how you're when you, at least in this book, I know you've become more of an expert in the writing of the book, but the journey through the book, you really weren't an expert, and that it was very fun to explore that through your eyes and watch you kind of shift things for yourself and become more adept at this different way.
Yeah, and I think that is the absolute joy of my profession. Being a writer, as a journalist, is you're always getting to learn new things and explore new ideas. And I was just incredibly lucky. I mean, my agent sold this book based on a proposal, a chapter by chapter outline, and a few sample chapters, which is something that doesn't happen very, usually with nonfiction, it's a full manuscript that is purchased.
Yeah.
And so I was just incredibly lucky. And in timing too, people are interested in Finland. For example, the World Happiness Report named Finland the world's happiest country. There's all kinds of stuff that was very newsworthy that increased the interest in any topic Finnish. But I think I've always been incredibly fortunate. I've just been handed these opportunities where I've been petrified, but it's been okay, I'm going to try, I'm going to tap into some fortitude I didn't even know I had. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go for it. Many years ago, I did TV news here for the English language news service for the public broadcaster. And it wasn't something that I went after. I just went for an interview to see if they needed people for the English language news service. And it turned out part of the deal was you had to do the TV news as well. And I was just petrified during the screen test and, learning how to operate the teleprompter and, everything, and try to look really calm and, as if you know what you're talking about on air. Mm-hmm. But it was an excellent opportunity for overcoming all of my fears and learning, how to speak in a confident, articulate way. And, when you make a mistake, what you do, and a whole variety of skills. And I've just repeatedly had these amazing opportunities where, somebody hands me this opportunity and says, okay, what do you think? And it's like, okay, I will try it and see where it goes. And that's, I think, what writing a book is about too. Even if you have written lots of books and you're an expert, it's always a kind of journey, and it's always a kind of, overcoming yourself. You have to have a discipline of writing X number of hours a day, of doing your research, of, all those sorts of things. So, does that answer your question? I think I went off topic a bit.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We were talking about what you're going to do forward, but it's all good. It's all good. Well, I really appreciate you being on board. We already know you've already told everybody about your Instagram feed. Is that the best place to find you? Are you Twitter also?
Yeah, I think so, because lately I've been much more active on Instagram than on like Twitter and Facebook, and Instagram just feels like the natural, nice, happy meeting place for people who want to find out more.
Do you have a handle that you want to tell people about on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or is it just your name, or how do they do it?
It's just name. On Twitter, it's my name, and on Instagram, it's my name. I've just used that as a handle for lack of any. I thought it would be too much to go with a Sisu or a something else, and then because the book has a different name in different countries, and not just the English language ones, but the German ones and all those. So I thought the best thing is to just go with the writer's name. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done the same thing. I'm very non-creative. All my handles are Andy Petronic. So
yeah,
it makes it really easy for people to find me.
It does.
I think it was smart for you to do that.
Yeah, I agree with you, because I find a lot of people have handles where it's like, oh, that's my friend so and so, like, because their handle is like completely has nothing to do with anything that I know about them.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry about the technical problems at the beginning, but this has been fantastic. I mean, this has been everything that I hoped it would be, this conversation, after reading your book. And I just am really, really happy for you and the success of the book, and very grateful for what you're communicating to the world through this message. It's really awesome.
Thank you so much. That's really, really kind. I really appreciate your feedback, and it was lovely to be able to join you. Like, thank you for the invitation to speak with you.
Hey, it's Andy, and thanks so much for listening. If you want to know more about what I'm learning each month, head over to andypetronic.com and subscribe to my monthly newsletter. If you were touched, moved, or inspired by anything you heard today, chances are someone else you know would be too. Please take a moment to think about who and send them a link to this episode. And if you're super stoked, please head over to iTunes to write a review. The best way to keep current on guests and episodes is to subscribe so that the latest one will automatically get delivered straight to your phone. The apps I use for this are Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or Pocket Casts. The Andy Petronic podcast is produced by our team, Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. Big thanks to Nikki Grudadaria for the artwork. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. I'm Andy Petronic. Thanks for listening.